Welcome to Slimehouse TV, the show that brings you the very best in underground movies, cult music and anything else cool, artistic, retro and edgy. In today's episode we're going to be sitting down with legendary illustrator and artist Greg Staples. Now this is a guy that for the last 20 years has completely conquered the comic book world, the gaming world, the movie world. This guy pioneered many of the looks that are now iconic with the 2000 AD character Judge Dredd. So I dug deep and I managed to secure a contact with him. Now this is a guy that doesn't do many interviews, but being originally a Sheffielder himself, he agreed to come onto Slimehouse TV for an interview. So this is how we got on. Slimehouse TV, honoured to be here with Greg Staples, one of my favourite artists ever. I'm going to get straight into some questions with him. What I want to talk about first is the stuff that influenced you from a young age, and what are your earliest memories of wanting to be an artist?
Earliest days really were junior school, you know. I used to do a lot of nature drawings, believe it or not. And then I discovered Spider-Man, and that was it. I was just drawing Spider-Man just all the time. I mean, I just used to love it. Not even that. I got comics for, like, we used to go to Skegness when we were kids, you know. It was like old school sort of caravans. We used to kind of go and stay in, and they used to have all the imported cheap comics in the kind of like gift shops, and I picked up a Spider-Man comic. I just couldn't believe what it was. I didn't know anything about the artists or anything, but that was the first time I actually realised I could draw something other than, you know, that would excite me.
So I want to talk about your journey into getting paid professional work, from starting out wanting to be an illustrator and actually getting the paid work. Did you go to college or anything like that for it? Or
I actually went to college to train to be an architect. When I actually was leaving school and went in to speak to some careers advisor, and I just always wanted to be a comic artist. That was it. You know, I discovered 2000 AD and I was obsessed with it. I just thought this was so great. It was really dark, but it was funny, and it got, you know, I thought Judge Dredd was great. And I thought, this is the comic I want to draw for. And I told my careers advisor, and they laughed and said, there's no money in comics. So they said, why don't you, the closest thing is being an architect, because you get to draw. Okay. I mean, what nonsense, because it just, you know, I was stuck there, and my drawing board at the architects company was just surrounded by pictures of comic book characters. And my boss came along after about a year or so and said, I think you might be in the wrong business. So then what I actually did was, I got made redundant, and I thought, right, this is my chance. So I spent a year working on a portfolio. And after that, I went to a comic book convention in London by myself, which was very intimidating because I was probably only 17, maybe 18. Couldn't get anybody to look at my work until Simon Bisley saw it. And Simon Bisley you know, he'd just done Slain, and he was really big at the time. And he looked and he said, I like this bit, I like that bit, but you need to work on a few little bits here. He says, I reckon, you know, you might be ready in a year. Now, most people might be put off. I just took it serious. And I went back and I tripled my efforts. And I worked on a portfolio that was up to a professional standard.
so when you was told that by Bisley, was it just drawing every day non-stop?
What I actually did was I got two part-time jobs. One was in Nostalgia and Comics in Sheffield, which is now Forbidden Planet, Sheffield. I just had a little bit of part-time work there, you know, just working a few hours, and then in the afternoon I'd go home and work on my portfolio. But I really, really stuck to it, and I produced 12 pieces of art, spent maybe a month on each one. I thought, I'll worry about the deadlines when it comes, you know. And then what I did was, I did something that was quite brutal. I got the next convention, the year later convention, ready to go, and I took out 6 pieces of art, 3 of which were the best. So I went to the next convention, couldn't get anybody to look at my work again. And I saw Simon Bisley. By this time, Simon Bisley was like...
Sick of seeing you. Like.
Well, he does it, but the thing is, he was like the biggest artist in the world at this point. Because he'd had Judgment on Gotham out, he'd had, you know, he'd broken America at this point. He was doing Doom Patrol, he was doing all kinds of cool stuff, Lobo. And he was just swamped all the time. And I managed to grab him. I was about to go for my train in about an hour or so. And I said, would you look at this? I've got to go, you know, nobody will look. And he said, I'm busy. And I said, look, do you remember me from last year? I said, I worked really hard on this. Please just take a look. And he looked in silence and then said, come with me. And he went right to the front of this big queue and went, give this man a job to 2000 AD. Yeah. 2000 AD took a look and said, give us a call on Monday. And I know, that's it. No, I've never been out of work since. One of the big things, one of the defining things that I think can make or break an artist is if he can look at another artist that he admires and say, that's great, I want to be as good as that or better than that, and not be intimidated by it. If there's an artist who I think can kind of look at an artist and get jealous or it can go against you. So for me, every artist that does something that I really admire and that I can think, wow, that's amazing, I really praise it. I'm just like, wow, that's fantastic. And I work towards, I do my own thing, very much my own thing these days, but I work towards a standard that I go, okay, that's the benchmark, and I have to get above that. And I'm constantly reviewing that. And that's why my work is constantly developing, and it steps to the side and backwards and forwards, but it's always to get to be one of the best, you know. And it's not about money, it's not about anything other than the fact that I'm incredibly motivated and driven, you know, because I want a legacy to leave behind. Even if it's not much, I want it to be something I can look back and be proud of.
One of my favourite games ever on PlayStation, because I'm a big gamer, was Loaded. I didn't even know at the time of being young that was you that did it, but I think weren't you like, if I've worked out right, like 25 when you worked on Loaded? Like that 24. Just makes me never ever want to draw ever again.
I think I was 23 or 24. I think I was 24, and yeah, it was one of those things where painted art was on its way out of 2000 AD, and I felt I needed to do something outside of comics, and I did some work for Gremlin on a game called Shadowfire. And they said, we have another game which is really, you know, we've got in mind, it's got some crazy character ideas that had been designed. There's a couple of characters that had been designed by a guy called Aid Carlos, who was really good designer, game designer. And they said, do you want to come in and develop some more and do some artwork towards it? I said, great. And I was there for a year or so, you know, and I came up with all these crazy ideas like transvestites with a map. I don't even know where that stuff came from. I just was obviously young and cocky.
I remember Fwank on the front cover, the clown, like proper iconic image. So you've worked on some of like the biggest characters out there. Just tell me some of the characters that you've worked on, some of your favourites, and is there any that you haven't worked on yet that you'd like to?
Yeah, well, I think, you know what? I think I've worked on most characters that I want. There's not many. I think now I'm starting to more think about doing my own sort of characters and writing my own sort of books, and I'm very much into films and filmmaking and design as well. And you know, I'm working on a game at the moment, which I love working in games. I think that side of things is really of interest for the future. I love comics. Dredd has always been probably my favourite. I don't know why I connect so much with it. Obviously, I like Batman, and you know, Batman's such a great character, and various other characters. But I think I've been lucky enough, really, to have worked on many of my favourite characters when I was quite young, which has given me the opportunity to basically pick and choose a lot of the projects, which is very lucky. You know, very lucky for me now. So yeah, I think at the moment I'm just taking my time.
Just going back a bit, talking about your own stories and stuff, you gave me this comic today, Judge Dredd, Dark Justice, so thank you for that. Do you want to just tell us a bit about where this idea came from? And you're telling me about how you painted each page individually, completely painted, even the white lines are where you've masked off. Do you want to just tell me a bit about the production of this?
Okay, well, what had happened was that the creator of Judge Dredd, the writer, John Wagner, who's one of my heroes, so he'd written a lot of the stories that inspired me to want to be an artist in the first place. And my favourite character was Judge Death, because I actually drew a picture of Judge Death when I was 8 years old and sent it in to the comic, because he just terrified me. He was a really frightening character. And he's been explored over the years, but he's been more, they've done more comedic stuff with him. And I said to him, I said, look, I think he disappeared for a long time. And I said to John, look, I'd love to do a horror book, but do it like it's a film, because the Dredd film didn't do quite as well at the box office as it could. And the sequel was apparently going to feature Judge Death. So there was a lot of disappointment that film wasn't going to get made anymore. So I thought, how about we write this, John will write this book, I illustrate it, and it feels like a big budget Hollywood film with Judge Death and Judge Dredd, how I'd want to see it. And that was the start of the conversations, and it took me maybe a long time, maybe a year, to persuade him to write, because he said, I'm done with Judge Death, I don't want to do him. But he eventually came around to the idea when he saw a picture that I'd done, and and that was the long road after that. I did the first page and I went, I'm in trouble, because it took forever.
Being an artist myself, sometimes I'll sit down and I'll look at what I'm drawing and I just hate it, and like, you just have them days where you just completely lose faith in your skill level and what you're drawing, and you're like, I hate my style, I'm looking at this guy over here and he's amazing and my stuff's rubbish. I'm sure as an artist you have them days where you have like that block where you're just feeling down about your own work. How do you persevere through them times?
To be honest, I don't really think like that anymore. It's really funny, it's just, you have to have an incredibly thick skin to be a professional artist. Yeah, of course you get days where you don't really feel like it. How I think I counteract it is that I tend to not do a lot in my spare time. And when I have a break, if I go on holiday somewhere, then I realise that while I'm away, especially if not brought, I'd never take drawing equipment with me. I can't wait to get back and start drawing.
So are you self-critical of your own stuff? I'm majorly critical of everything I do, and everything I do creative. Are you critical yourself?
Yeah, immensely critical. I mean, but not everything that I think, because I've managed to get a technique down, which, I've developed myself to be able to get what's in my head down. And that's a really, really interesting thing and important thing to be able to do. And I wish that I'd learned this early on, which was to find a technique that means that you can actually do, instead of it being trial and error. I hope this is going to work out. So I plan it now in stages where I know exactly how it's going to look at the end. So everything that I do is intentional. So if I make, say for example, big hands on something, I quite like drawing big hands and feet. It just seems to add a bit of weight and a bit of, I don't know, it's a stylistic thing. It's entirely intentional. There's not a lot, so there's no room for anything, because if somebody doesn't like it or they don't like it, that's my fault then.
So you're obviously creative, you've been creative since day one. This whole show is about art and people doing cool creative stuff, and the reason I put the show together is because to me art means everything. What does art mean to you?
You're right, everything. It is truly the define, it's defined my life, and I love it more now than when I started. It's something that is constantly growing, something that truly, has given me a purpose. And I think every man needs a purpose in life, and mine is to hopefully entertain people, and that's basically what I am, an entertainer. And if I've given anybody some pleasure from my work, then I've done my job right.
Just the final question, advice for anyone else that's wanting to do what you do, whether it be concept art or comic art or illustration?
It sounds cheesy, follow your heart, go with your instincts. Your instincts are never wrong. And every single time that I've gone against my instincts and thought, oh, this seems like a cool idea, no, just go with your instincts, do what makes you happy. Always be prepared to not necessarily be making money, do it for the passion, and hopefully money will come as a result of that. I'm a big believer in the fact that work in itself is the reward. And for me it's worked out, hopefully it will for anybody else who gives it a try. And that doesn't go just for art, that goes for anybody working with something they're passionate about.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, Greg. As you know, I'm a big fan and I know you don't do many interviews, so thanks very much for joining us today.